A proposition. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Doug Warren, the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships from AVEVA. Welcome, Doug. Just take, sorry.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, that'll get some people into the room. As Craig had mentioned, I'm going to represent AVEVA here for the next 30 minutes or so. We're going to talk not just about technology and the application of technology, but also the digital transformation process. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their schedule for coming. And with that, we'll go ahead and proceed. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that digital transformation and Industry 4.0, as some of the other speakers earlier today had already indicated, it's already here. It's not just about something that's to come, it's already here, and happy to say that we've already seen it quite prevalent in Indonesia itself. So here's a quote from your president, Mr. Widodo, where asked the question, is Industry 4.0, is that revolution a great opportunity? His answer, a resounding yes. If we prepare, if we plan, and we can anticipate it, then too will come success. And as some of the esteemed government officials talked about earlier this morning, Indonesia's plan is built on 5 key technologies, some of which we'll talk about over the next 30 minutes. 5 priority sectors within the industry, including food and bev, with key stakeholders, and a lot of those key stakeholders have actually been represented here already this morning. People from government, people from industry associations, different tech companies, be they companies like Schneider Electric, companies like AVEVA, and research and educational organizations as well. Then lastly, we also heard some of the expected results, and most importantly was the key ambition to take Indonesia from its current position in terms of global economies from somewhere in the neighborhood of number 16 in 2018 up to the top 10. Very ambitious, but I think very attainable given the willingness of the Indonesian people to take on some of these new challenges and be on the forefront of implementation. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these drivers. I think Mike already did a good job of articulating them. Hopefully everybody could understand it through his Scottish accent. We're really throwing a lot at you guys here today. We start with someone who's from Australia, then we move to somebody, Luc Ramon, who's very French, as well as Xavier. Then we go switch things up, just as you tune into that, switch things up to Scottish, and now we put somebody up from Canada. I wonder what'll be next. We'll try to keep you guessing and keep you on your toes here today. When we talk about industry drivers, Mike talked about changing customer needs, changing customer tastes, and not just the variety and the challenges that creates for multiple different SKUs within a manufacturing environment, but also different allergens, different needs in different varieties in terms of that. Mike talked about raw materials and the changes coming to the upstream part of the supply chain, and also talked about some of the downstream impacts beyond your manufacturing. talking about workforce dynamics, I think Indonesia presents a very interesting case, maybe not so much one where the age of the workforce is of a particular issue, because I think in Indonesia, a very young workforce to start with, but certainly one where training becomes more and more critical, and one of the use cases that I'll talk about in a few minutes is around training, something that we can do in addition to what Xavier talked about in terms of the SKM relationship that we have across Indonesia, those kinds of training tools to help enable your workforce to work with to adapt this new technology, some of these new technologies that are becoming more and more prevalent and more essential to your success in smart manufacturing. So it is clear that with all this change, how we used to run plants, how we've worked thus far, is no longer an acceptable approach. We can't just continue to throw labor at these kinds of problems. We have to get much smarter in how we manage them as supply chains get more complex, as the amount of variety in the different products that we're taking to market becomes more complex, as we have more and more competition for that consumer, as that becomes more complex, we need to change our approach. And that's really what I'm here to talk about to the greatest degree, is digital transformation. How do you sift through all of the technology that's available, all of the buzzwords that are out there? How do you start? Where's the next step from there? How do you find success through that journey? So within Schneider Electric and AVEVA, we really look at digital transformation as just that. It is a journey, starting right from something that might be very opportunistic, where as there's money available, as we bring in a new line, as maybe it's a new product, so we're putting in a new line, then we're adding some digitization to the equation. That's what I would call opportunistic. Then as that digitization becomes a little bit more prevalent, we might see greater investments coming in technology and trying to automate some of the processes which in the past were more manual. This is the digitize part of the journey. Most of our customers find themselves somewhere between opportunistic and digitize. Then when we move to the next step beyond that, which I'll refer to today as digitalization, and I don't want to get too hung up on the terms, but certainly this is where we start to see an actual strategy within the company. This is where we see a chief digitization officer as part of your XCOM to develop that strategy, because this isn't a one-hit wonder. This is very much a journey, and without a strategy, you can find a lot of investments being made and maybe not driving the kind of return on that investment that you might desire as an organization. Then the last step in the journey, which we'll call true digital transformation, is where, as an entire organization, we see a cultural shift, and we start to transform work. We start to transform the way we do work. We don't just digitize a manual process, but rather we change that altogether. We skip steps that are no longer required. They might not be required because we have systems that are taking care of those steps. That is true digital transformation, and that is where we want to take our different customers. Okay. And that is really the point that I want to get after here. From our perspective, we don't want to implement technology for the sake of technology, but rather there has to be an underlying business need, an underlying business return. So this next section of what I talk about will really be dedicated to that. We've already talked about, or different speakers have already talked about operational excellence. And you can see some of the elements of operational excellence listed in the bullseye that I have up front. Now, obviously, these transformative things have to be driven by business imperatives. Mike talked about this a little bit. We talked about quality, regulatory compliance, talked about traceability, right from the agricultural source of a lot of your raw materials all the way through the downstream supply chain. Talked about operational efficiency, driving profitability through your organization. Talked about agility and the ability to change with your consumers' needs, desires, wants to make you more competitive in the marketplace. And ultimately driving more and more asset reliability, asset availability, and hence profitability. And to attain these business imperatives, we have a number of different technologies which we can apply. Everything from cloud-based technologies, and with it, some of the analytics, some of the AI, which I'll give you some examples about here in just a second, through to mobility, through to augmented and virtual reality. Again, not dreams about the future, but things that you can see in the expo hall today. Big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, I'll talk about that, and ultimately digital twin. Okay, so when it comes to digital transformation, we really like to talk about the big three: people, process, and technology. And we say in that order because we very firmly believe that if we don't bring all of our stakeholders, all of our people, all of our employees along for the ride, that adoption won't be there. And without that adoption, nor will be the overall return on investment that you're seeking in this digital transformation. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about people, process, and technology. First of all, from a people perspective, when we start these kinds of journeys, you really must engage the organization that will be adopting the technology and giving you that ROI. And what do we mean in terms of engaging your people? First of all, eliminating repetitive tasks so that people who are inherently very creative can apply some of that creative thinking to the next solution and the next solution beyond that. We want to provide supported decisions. Certainly, has anyone in the crowd ever been assigned an exciting new project and embarking upon it, you then had to go out and spend the next week collecting information? I know I've had those issues in the past. Well, imagine a world today where you don't have to spend that kind of time just collecting information. It's available at the touch of a button. Within a lot of the technologies that you see in the expo hall and are available, that is a reality today, where at the touch of a button I can collect all the information I need and with it make the kinds of decisions that add greater value to our business. And then again, human ingenuity is what we're trying to get after here. How do I take what I've learned today and what I learn tomorrow and then continuously improve over time? This is very, very critical. We had one instance where a customer, in order to engage his people, he started rolling out a mobility solution in one plant. And much like Mike described this morning, an older employee was very resistant to this iPad-type technology being put in his hands and said, here, now you're going to use this to do your work. Very, very intimidating in that case. What this particular customer did was he had that employee and his peers in the organization build a video. It was a training video. They were the first plant to adopt some of the new technology. And there was so much pride that that group of people got out of creating that video and then displaying it throughout the rest of the organization as a training tool. It was just brilliant. And after that first deployment, every other plant wanted the same recognition. They wanted to be the next ones to deploy the next module and be the ones who got recognized in the video. So that's just one example of the kind of transformation that engaging your workforce can have, and having them be much more open to adopting different technologies that you might want to look at in the future. The next of the P's is process. And again, when we talk about digital transformation, it's about how we change the way we do work. I already talked about minimizing waste. That's the first thing we want to do, and we want to look for areas that are highly repetitive that we can automate and leave people to do more creative things. In general, when do we want to do that? We want to do it way earlier in the process. Who here has a situation where they always seem to be chasing a problem? There's always a fire that we're trying to fight and put out. That's a very reactive kind of state, and when we're operating in that way, we just don't have time for the kind of creativity to get on with some of these other transformative projects. So we want to get after things far earlier in the process before they become a fire. With the advent of different mobility technologies, those kinds of things, we can either do that on the site or remotely. And when it comes to who, not only people within your plant, but maybe within your organization, you have certain experts, or maybe they're partners, and you want that remote expertise, you want that approachable or contactable by your operators on the floor, your maintenance people on the floor, so they can help walk them through a particular maintenance process that they're not having to do every week. So that remote expertise, that might be part of one of your strategies moving forward. Then lastly, how? Really a planned, proactive, guided approach. I think Mike talked a little bit about augmented reality and a guided workflow. So again, when one of our people is asked to perform a task, and maybe they've not been in the plant for 30 years, what kind of tools can we put in their hand to walk them through a standard work procedure, so they don't have to remember it? It's right in front of them. That's how they operate in their day-to-day lives. They don't have to remember all the details. They can go Google it. Well, why can't we provide them with that in a manufacturing or maintenance context? And the answer is we can. We do it all the time. Lastly, technology, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, because what I intend to do now is talk about it in the context of some customer successes. There's lots of technology out there, and you'll also hear it from a number of experts that come up on the plenary stage. I'm going to talk about it more in the context of some specific success stories to make it a little bit more, make it more real for you. The three that I'm going to zero in on. The Industrial Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, make that a little more real for you, and lastly, some examples of augmented and virtual reality that can be used in your businesses today. Okay, the first one that I'm going to look at is the Industrial Internet of Things, and I'm going to use an example of a large dairy producer in Turkey. The red label, the red cap, is really the brand that they would have you recognize. So the name is EcoStruxure, and they were established in about 1977. as a dairy producer in Turkey, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the solution that they implemented. As the first step in their digital transformation journey, they recognized that most of their processes in their plants were manual. So they started with an automation program at that edge control layer that you saw displayed earlier. That and above that, they applied a Wonderware product. Wonderware is one of the brands that are under our umbrella. System platform to collect information from the different automation devices and then put it into a historian product. So what that did was collect all the data from the plant floor and then aggregate it in one place, where then we have some options around applying analytics, applying that big data kind of approach. Without that data collection and aggregation layer, it's pretty hard to go much further. It's pretty hard to tie in things upstream and downstream. You have to have a starting point. This was Eaker's starting point. And what kinds of benefits did they achieve? As Mike indicated before, they were able to take an existing group of facilities, and rather than just continually add more and more and more, they were able to get more production out of the existing facilities they had. In this case, way back when they were about 10 tons a day, now they're doing 600 tons a day of different dairy products, whether it happens to be the kind of milk that comes out of this bottle, whether it happens to be yogurt, whether it happens to be cream, whether it happens to be cheese, and other dairy dessert products. This data collection layer, historian layer, was the starting point in their journey. And really the other thing with this data collection is they were able to integrate with different quality systems and start to provide the kind of traceability that's really required in today's regulatory environment in food and bev. That's the first one. You can see some of these different solutions in the AVEVA booth in the expo area. The second one I'm going to talk about is artificial intelligence. Over to my table. In this case, I don't know if anybody has kids, but it's a manufacturer of these crackers. And what they did in their production lines was leverage machine learning, really, to provide predictive maintenance capabilities to their machines. It's an offer within the AVEVA portfolio that we call Prism. And along their line, their overall production line, they start with dough, a laminator, then an oven, then some different elevators to move the product up to packaging. And using these predictive technologies, I'll describe a little bit how it works. You have a number of different sensors on a particular machine or work center on your line, a number of different sensors. What the system does is it looks at not just individual sensors, but the whole group of sensors that drive that part of the line. It looks at all the history, and remember in the previous example, I talked about historian and how important it was to Eaker. In this case, without that historical information, pretty tough to apply machine learning. What we were able to do was analyze or learn how one sensor reacts to another sensor, which reacts to another sensor, how all of those sensors work together. And when one of those readings starts to depart from the other readings, that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of anomaly that we're able to capture or catch, and with that predict a potential failure in the future. And once we've identified that potential failure, then we can do something about it. Then we can do something about it as opposed to running around fighting fires, as I talked about earlier. So here's a case where we're using artificial intelligence, more specifically machine learning, to get a real tangible benefit. Predictive maintenance to allow you to then schedule, maybe during the next scheduled production outage, maybe I'm going to bring in whatever spare parts, and I'm going to schedule people to actually fix that problem before we have a catastrophic failure. Now, in this particular example, the first area where we actually got a catch was on the laminator. And on the laminators where we roll layers of the dough to form the basic biscuit. And obviously, if we don't do a good enough job of that, we get very puffy, very almost blistered kind of crackers. If we don't do enough, we get kind of a solid lump of a cracker, which isn't all that good either. So it's a very precise rolling process. And like I said, we were able to catch a problem along that part of the line in the early going. The next part is an oven where we have a number of different zones going through that oven that make a perfect cracker that our kids all love. And above that is an oxidizer where some of the gases come off the oven, runs over a catalytic bed, and it reduces the emissions coming off that oven. Again, we got a second catch in the first 3 months of having the system up and running. That detected a potential plug that was coming, so that again, when that oven was next brought down, they were able to clean that system out and prevent the failure of the oven system overall, which takes a long time to get back up to heat, et cetera, resulting in downtime. So here's a couple of very good examples where machine learning provided very tangible benefits. In this case, we had 3 catches overall in the first 3 months. That represented $200,000 worth of savings. More and more crackers for your kids. So that's the second example of the use of technology to take us along that digital journey and provide real business value. Third one, back to my handy props. I'm going to talk a little bit about augmented and virtual reality. So much like what Mike showed you earlier, where we can walk a customer or walk an operator through a procedure, this is a manufacturer of frozen foods who you may recognize. I picked this up on my way over here earlier yesterday. So this is available in this market, and the machines that produce these kinds of products. So first of all, using augmented reality, you can see some green marks where I'm trying to draw the operator's attention to something on the screen. I have available on the left-hand side access to a whole bunch of different information. Maybe it's asset information, maybe it's manuals, maybe it's stored procedures, a number of different things. And again, if I'm trying to walk an operator through something that maybe he doesn't have to do every day, I can improve the safety, I can improve the throughput, and ultimately I can improve the uptime. And through this same interface, I can also have that operator call an expert. Maybe you have a center of excellence for these types of machines. Maybe you have a vendor, an OEM of these types of machines. You can call him or her and have them walk the operator through the different troubleshooting steps. So again, a very real, very, very relevant application of these kinds of technologies today. Take that a step further to virtual reality, where we can have a full 3D simulation of a machine and use it to help train operators on how to maintain it, how to operate it, those kinds of things. A full immersive kind of approach to to training your people on new machines, new lines, those kinds of things. So here's some very tangible ways to apply this technology today. So I really want to talk, just to close here, on digital transformation and more so, again, than the technology itself, but more so the journey, because it's not a one-time event. It is very much a journey towards greater and greater ROI for your business. And the first step is obviously choosing the right partner who's in there for the long run. And I'm happy to say that indeed Schneider Electric, with their EcoStruxure architecture, supported in behind by AVEVA, is really the best combination of those capabilities. AVEVA, with our broad portfolio that goes right from the design of your plant, the way you lay out the machines, the way you lay out the lines, through to different asset performance, like the predictive maintenance system that I talked about earlier, monitoring and control. By far, we are the world's leader in this space, with over 40% market share globally around marketing and control type applications, through to planning, scheduling, and operating and optimizing your assets. We apply all these technologies as part of EcoStruxure, generally at the top layer that you saw illustrated by Luke, Xavier, and certainly Mike earlier, that apps, analytics, and services layer as part of EcoStruxure. Mike showed something similar to this. I have a little bit of a different take on it. When it comes to digital transformation, start with defining the business imperatives, defining the business outcomes that you think are the most important. Second one is about people, that we talked about earlier. Then we'll apply that to your operations as a whole, and make sure, as Mike said, take advantage of some of these opportunities to adopt new business models and ultimately engage your customers that drives greater value, both on the cost management side and on the revenue side, as you saw earlier. It's here today. It's not going away. Embrace it, love it, be part of it. Make sure that you prepare, plan, anticipate, as the President of Indonesia indicated. Very, very wise words. Start today if you haven't already. Jump in, the water's fine, and we're here to help. We're here to help with the implementation of that technology, with the adoption of your people. And lastly, take advantage of some of these opportunities to surpass your competitors and engage your customers right from the point of consumption back into your through your supply chain, all the way through to your manufacturing facilities. Again, come to the AVEVA booth. We're in booth number 30 for more information, and enjoy. Take the opportunity to network. We're here for the next 3 days, so really appreciate your time, and look forward to more and more conversations with you as the days go by. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug.